Mr. Sergeant of Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close the doors. I hereby declare the House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Will the members please stand? Will the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Representative Cochran will serve as chaplain of the day. Representative Cochran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and it's an honor to be before you the day after Easter. You know, we talk a lot about, we think about what was happening on Good Friday, obviously a day of great sadness, and then on Easter morning, a day of great triumph. I don't know that I've ever really thought about until I was looking into being with you this evening, what that day after Easter must have felt like. So there was the great excitement of the resurrection the day of. I would imagine that day after was filled with renewed hope. And to share with you 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 3, praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. And basically what that tells us is not only was there hope that first day after the resurrection, but there's that exact same hope and that same fervent hope today, 2,000 years later. So that hope remains. And just to bring it back to this body a little bit and to kind of paraphrase the battle hymn of the Republic, as Christ died to make men holy, let it always be our goal to live to make men free. If you'll bow with me. Dear Lord, thank you, God, for being with us and for being with this state, Lord. We ask you for your abundant wisdom, Lord, and for your discernment as we make decisions that affect the lives of many, many people, Lord. Please, God, just be with us throughout this week, Lord. Help us to always be examples in your name. And it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Representative Cochran, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Roll call.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 92 members present.
Let the journal reflect that Representatives Byrd, Carter, Grills, and Ogles are excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
Welcome and honoring Representative Sapicki. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, back in Murray County over the weekend, we had two baseball players. One from Zion Christian Academy had a very, very bad accident on the baseball field. He was taken to the hospital. It looks like he's going to be okay over time, but he has some major facial injuries from impacting another opponent's knee. So if you just keep them and their family in their prayer, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. And Representative Johnson of Knox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Friday, my assistant, Susan Cove, passed away. She was pretty awesome. She loved a tough problem. Not a lot of my constituents know her by face, but they talked to her, and she was the lady with the Boston accent that helped them solve their problem. So a few seconds of silence, please.
Thank you. Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, yesterday, Wilson County in Lebanon lost a pillar in our community, Mr. Danny Stewart. He had done many things in the civic organizations in Wilson County. He chaired the Chamber of Commerce. He owned Advanced Propane in Lagardo. He was a family man, a strong Christian, and I just want to take a moment of silence as remember his wife Diane and their children at this time, please. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Calfee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This wasn't the introduction we'd hoped for, but we have our little boy Sawyer that's we have custody of. Cracked his head up there and probably going to have some stitches. And this wasn't the entrance we hoped to make, but I pray he's going to be okay. And just thank him and Marilyn in your prayers and thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you. Representative Carringer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, April is Child Abuse Prevention Month across America and right here in Tennessee. Thousands of children are abused every day, and thanks to Child Help Tennessee, I have some lapel pins back here on my desk. And if you would like to have one, please come by so that we can wear them as a body to stand up for children and against child abuse. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Representative Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, help me welcome two special people from Robertson County. Over there is Miss Lisa Jernigan, a lifelong piano teacher, although I did not learn from her, and her granddaughter, Scotty. They're visiting us, and it's great to have them.
Representative Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I love it when folks from my district come down here to the People's House. And up there, standing tall, is Hagen and his mother, Natasha Wagner from DeKalb County. Would you make them welcome, please?
Anyone else? Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of resolutions.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all resolutions properly filed be introduced pursuant to Rule Number 17 and placed on the consent calendar referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate joint resolutions congratulatory and memorializing.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all Senate joint resolutions congratulatory and memorializing line of the desk be placed on the consent calendar pursuant to Rule Number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Resolutions lying over.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all resolutions lying over be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of bills, Senate bills on first consideration.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move the Senate bills 28, 137, 212, 623, 636, 829, and 1,104 transmitted by the Senate be held on the desk pending third consideration of the companion House bills.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on second consideration, House bills on second consideration.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that House bills 1,625 through 1,627 be passed on second consideration and be held on the desk or referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Petitions and memorials, reports from standing committees, reports from select committees, calendars. Mr. Speaker, the House has a consent calendar.
Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of the consent calendar on third and final consideration in keeping with Rule 50.
Gentleman moves passage of the consent calendar, probably second. Mr. Clerk, any objections been filed? Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, item 13, House Bill 1371 has been objected to by Chairman Dixie. Item 15, House Joint Resolution 185 has been objected to by Chairman Dixie. Item 23, House Bill 930 has been objected to by Chairman Dixie. And finally, Mr. Speaker, item 28, House Bill 487 has been objected to by Chairman Dixie.
Anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Seeing none, we're voting on the consent calendar. All members in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
Having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare the consent calendar passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a regular calendar.
Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 174 by Chairman Wendell.
Chairman Wendell, at your desk.
Mr. Speaker, Colonel Whitson and I request that be rolled for 2 weeks.
Without objection, rolled 2 weeks. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 350 by Leader Lamberth and others, a resolution to congratulate Candace Owens on relocating to Tennessee.
Leader Lamberth, recognized at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We can roll that to Thursday's regular calendar.
Without objection, roll to Thursday's Without objection, roll to Thursday's regular calendar. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 351 by Leader Lamberth, a resolution to congratulate Tommy Laren on relocating to Tennessee.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of HJR number 351.
Leader Lamberth moves adoption. Properly second. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Leader Lamberth renews his motion. Any discussion? Once, twice, three. I do not see any. Any objections to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Joint Resolution 351, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 71, 20 nays.
House Joint Resolution 351, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 358 by Chairman Carr and others, a resolution to recognize and honor beloved Tennessean and cultural icon Dolly Parton for her contributions to children's literacy.
Chairman Carr, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of HJR 358.
Chairman Carr moves adoption. Properly second. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Carr, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with your indulgence, I would ask Chairman Spicky to say a few words.
Chairman Spicky, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Carr. First of all, I'd say thank you to Chairman Carr and Chairman Farmer for sponsoring this bill or this resolution. There are many great Tennesseans that we live around and live with. Dolly Parton has been one her whole life, representing the great state of Tennessee everywhere, from shore to shore here in our country and also around the world. And what we've just done with literacy in Tennessee in our special session, our extraordinary session, we've taken a stand in Tennessee that education is going to be a primary focus for us moving forward so that all children can read, write, and do math, but most importantly, be able to read. Dolly has spent most of her life with the Imagination Library, working to sponsor that from preschool to birth, from birth to fifth grade. The program has registered 1.7 million Tennesseans in this program, and the Imagination Library has distributed 152 million books to children to help them read. And we can't find anybody anywhere in the state of Tennessee that would be the best first lady of literacy than Dolly Parton. And we ask for your support. Education Committee does, and everybody else here to support Dolly Parton in this resolution, recognizing her for her commitment to the educational outcomes and literacy of Tennessee students. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Carr, you're recognized. You renew your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if it's allowable, I would like for all those who voted in the affirmative to be listed as co-prime sponsors. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Without objection, exclusion is duly noted. Any discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Joint Resolution 358, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
House Joint Resolution 358, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1137 by Representative Grills.
Chairman Todd at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we move House Bill 1137 to the next available calendar, next available spot.
Without objection, House Bill 1137 rolled to next available calendar, next available spot. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 938 by Representative Sparks and others relative to state symbols.
Representative Sparks, you are recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I move passage of House Bill 938 on third and final consideration.
Representative Sparks moves passage, properly second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House naming and designating committee amendment number 1.
Chairman Wendell, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, move to adopt.
Chairman Wendell moves adoption amendment number 1, properly second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Sparks, you are recognized.
Thank you, members. Members, if I could get your attention, I just want to thank MTSU Center for Popular Music, Dr. Greg Reish and Dr. Steve Shuron for their assistance and research on this resolution. And also, if you look at the importance of the hymn Amazing Grace, if you really study the research on this, our state has more connection to that hymn than any other state in the nation. It was sang on the Trail of Tears, been sang by slaves, been sang by presidents and others as well. And I want to thank Senator Akbar for carrying it on the Senate side. With that being said, Mr. Speaker, I want to renew my motion.
Representative Sparks renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 938 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Curcio, aye. Farmer, aye. Freeman, aye. Whitson, aye. Lamberth, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, 1 nay.
House Bill 938, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 103 by Chairman Faison and others, a resolution to urge Tennesseans to register as organ and tissue donors.
Chairman Faison, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of HJR 103.
Chairman Faison moves adoption, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Faison, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I want to tell you a story that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I know it's fun to talk, but I want to tell you a story about my sister. She was killed by a drunk driver when I was 14 years old. And when the wreck happened, my sister only had head trauma. She had just turned 16 the week before. And when we got to the hospital, there was an unbelievable amount of pressure on my parents to get them to donate my sister's organs. And I was only 14 at the time, and I remember thinking, wow, what if we could save some people's lives? But then there was this hope. What if my sister could make it through and get out of the coma that she was in? And she was also being kept alive by mechanical means. And as history would have it, my parents were in such an emotional trauma that they didn't make the decision to take my sister off of life support and use her organs for somebody else. All of my life, that decision has bothered me because I always thought, wow, whose life could she have saved? And I was speaking at my daughter's school earlier this year at a government class, and this young lady right here, Maggie Vick, stand up, Maggie. She's a D1 athlete too, by the way. She asked me, she said, we had question and answer time. She said, Jeremy, Tennessee is known for people to come here and get surgeries when they need an organ transplant. But Tennesseans as a whole isn't. And so I wanted you to hear, there's just some statistics that we put together. There's currently in America 110,000 Americans who are on a waiting list for an organ donorship. There's 3,100 Tennesseans on a waiting list for an organ donorship. Last year in Tennessee, there was 11,116 organ transplants for Tennesseans, and that was made possible by only 390 Tennesseans. If you look at your driver's license and you go through the Department of Safety, you can put a little red heart on your driver's license. And so the reason I'm telling you that, first of all, is my friend Maggie brought it back to my attention of how important this is. But then secondly, here's the deal. When you're in the middle of emotional trauma, such as what my family was going through, it's really impossible to make rational decisions about what's right and what's best. So I'm bringing an urgent resolutions to urge Tennesseans as a whole to look in this. I would encourage you to look at your driver's license, see if you have that little red heart. And if you don't, look into it. What if that you could be a part of something that saves somebody else's life? And I believe when you look at Tennessee, we claim to be pro-life as a whole. What is more pro-life than realizing that when you get to the end, if something's wrong, that you could give of your own life to be part of saving somebody else's life. So this resolution is just simply doing that, letting Tennesseans know where we're at in organ donorship, and also in urging people to take ownership of this, realize what you can do and what you could do to potentially save somebody else's life. And Mr. Speaker, with that, I renew my motion.
Chairman Faison renews his motion. Any discussion? Representative Kumar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chairman Faison, for bringing this matter to everybody's attention. We can't do enough for it. Decisions for organ donation in the middle of a great tragedy in one's family are really, really overwhelming. My experience with that is that when I was a young transplant surgeon in Miami in 1977, and being the junior person on the faculty, it was my job to go to the emergency room during such a tragedy and ask the family for donation. There are no good words, and it's not easy to do so. But my memory of it is also of people who showed incredible courage and grace in the midst of their tears and a great tragedy. I learned a lot from those people because they were courageous people. And I think Tennesseans are in that category too. And once again, my memories of that are very deep, and I wanted to share them. And sharing a tragic time with people when we are asking them to give something so special I learned a lot from it. Thank you, Chairman Faison, for bringing this to our attention, and I think we can really contribute and save lives by doing this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Chairman Dixie.
Thank you, Chairman Faison, for bringing this bill. And I just want to share a quick personal story with me. My mother-in-law, which I called her mom, and matter of fact, she passed away 7 years ago during Easter, right on Friday of Easter. She had a brain aneurysm. And because of the preparation, she had already become a donor. She had already designated that she wanted to be a donor. So on the worst day of our lives, knowing that we were having to say goodbye to our loved one, we made 5 people have the best days of their lives. There was a person that got her liver. They told them that night there was nothing else they could do for him. Can you imagine the surprise and the jubilation that family felt, knowing that they was going to extend their family's lives, their family members' lives? So thank you for bringing this awareness to this, and I support you, and I hope that everyone who has the forethought and the awareness to become a donor. Thank you.
Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I too just want to commend the sponsor of this legislation, and also remind the body that there are currently 100,000 people in this country that are waiting on a kidney donation. And you actually can donate your kidney while you are still alive and be considered for kidney donation. So just want to remind the body that hopefully we can get more people to step up and consider kidney donation in this country. Thank you again for this resolution.
Any further discussion? Any Chairman Faison to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also wanted to remind y'all that April is Donor Month, and it's Save a Life Month for the whole month of April. And I just thought how more appropriate for us to pass this resolution than right now in the month of April. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any objections to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Joint Resolution 103, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts their vote, the same members change their vote. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
House Joint Resolution 103, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1166 by Representative Harris and others relative to siblings in foster care.
Representative Harris, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1166 on third and final consideration.
Representative Harris moves, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt Amendment 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan moves adoption of Amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Harris, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1166 requires that a foster care agency provide contact information to siblings who live in separate homes if doing so is in the best interest of each child, and establishes that a child in foster care cannot be punished by restricting contact with a sibling. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Harris renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1166 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
House Bill 1166, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1543 by Representative Weaver and others relative to the Star Spangled Banner Day. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Weaver, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 316.
Representative Weaver moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 316 without objection. So ordered. Representative Weaver, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 316 on third and final consideration.
Representative Weaver moves passage of Senate Bill 316 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up the First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Weaver, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill, when passed, will commemorate or designate September 14th of each year as the Star Spangled Banner Day, a day of special observance. A little history here for some of you freshmen. My very first bill that I came up into the well with trembling and shaking, there was a representative who sat back on the back left side. His name is Representative Ben West, a wonderful man. I highly got to know him. We got to be good friends. And I remember when I was up here, he said, Representative Weaver, can you present this bill that you have to music? And I was kind of befumbled, and I looked back at the speaker, and he just went like this. So I didn't have a way to express the bill with a song. Now, 13 years later, I'm going to do that. And so I want to sing a verse of our national anthem that many people do not even recognize that it exists. And it goes like this. I'm going to ask you to stand. Oh, thus be it here, when free men shall stand between their loved home and the war's desolation, blessed with victory and peace, let the heaven-rescued land praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation. Then conquer we must, when our cause it is just, and this be our motto: in God is our trust. Then the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph shall wave. Oh,
the land of the free and the home of the brave. On September 14th of each year, we will observe Star-Spangled Banner Day to join with our fellow citizens in celebration of this patriotic occasion across our state. That's it. I'm done. I don't have another verse.
Representative Weaver made a motion that anybody else coming up to the well tonight has to sing their statements. Representative Weaver renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 316 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As the remainder cast vote, assuming they wish to change their vote. Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 85, one nay.
Senate Bill 316, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 389 by Chairman Littleton and others relative to adoption assistant. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chair Lady Littleton, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and you can thank me later for not singing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 270.
Chairman Lady Littleton moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 270, properly seconded. Without objection, so ordered. Chair Lady Littleton, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 270 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Littleton moves passage of Senate Bill 270 on third and final consideration, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as Senate. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chair Lady Littleton, you are recognized.
Senate Bill 270 requires any person receiving federal or state-funded adoption assistance from DCS to annually provide DCS with medical records from the adopted child's annual physical examination or similar documentation from a medical or mental health professional or verification of full-time school enrollment from the school the child attends. Authorizes DCS to initiate a visit to ascertain the well-being of the child if the person fails to provide the required documentation. I'll renew my motion.
Chair Lady Littleton renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Before we vote, Chair Lady Littleton, there's something that she'd like to read. You're recognized.
This is where this bill came from. Michael Anthony Gray Sr. and his wife, Shirley Ann Gray, are faced with charges in a horrific child abuse case involving their adopted children. The investigation began when officials with the Roane County Sheriff's Office responded to a call stating someone dropped off a boy who said he didn't know where his parents were or where he was. The deputies that responded to the call found the boy and learned he lived at the Gray's home. They had moved into their home in 2016 with their 4 minor children, of whom they had adopted. The child was taken home and the deputies called the Department of Children's Services office in Kingston. And Mr. Gray told officials that there were other children around. There was one 15-year-old in the basement and another deceased child buried in the backyard under a pole barn. Detectives responded to the home and interviewed Mr. Gray, and he admitted that his daughter, around 11 years old, died in 2017 and was buried in the backyard. The daughter had reportedly been locked in the basement as punishment for stealing food and died a few weeks later. Her remains were found and taken for autopsy. During the investigation in May, Mr. Gray admitted that his 15-year-old son was kept in the basement. He was the oldest of 4 children and had been kept in the basement for 4 years. He was only given bread, and water. Authorities rescued the child from the basement before searching the home. The entire house smelled of urine and feces. The basement was unfinished and partially flooded. It lacked electricity and running water. It had no bathroom. It was full of human and animal feces, garbage, mold, and exposed wires. The body of the second child was found buried outside the home that was occupied by Michael Gray Jr., biological son of the Grays in Knox County. In addition, one other child periodically was kept inside a wire dog cage in the basement. Later, the Grays built a small concrete room measuring less than 3 feet by 4 feet under the stairs for confinement. All children were signed up for homeschooling according to the reports, and Shirley Gray completed the paperwork stating that all children were currently meeting all their homeschool assessments, despite the fact that 2 children were dead and other children were locked in the basements. Officials said the children appeared to be stunted in growth and lacked the necessary education for their age. In fact, 2 of the children appeared to have no formal education. Later, they were amazed at what a refrigerator does when they observed one in the foster home. The Gray family continued to receive adoption payments from the state and other financial benefits of both the deceased children for years. I renew my motion.
Very well. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 270, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
Senate Bill 270, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 235 by Chair Lady Littleton relative to purchasing procedures.
Chair Lady Littleton, you are recognized.
I move passage of House Bill 235 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Littleton moves passage properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chair Lady Littleton, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill increases from $10,000 to $25,000 the threshold for which a local board of education or governing body of a public charter school must make purchases or expenditures by competitive bids if a LEA chooses not to follow the local governing body's purchasing procedures. It establishes that counties that have adopted the County Financial Management System of 1981, the County Purchase Law of 1957, or similarly centralized for purchasing are deemed to have full-time purchasing agent and authorized to increase the competitive bid threshold up to $25,000 under certain conditions. With that, I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Littleton renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 235, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, no nays, 5 present, not voting.
House Bill 235, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 464 by Chair Lady Littleton relative to alcoholic beverages.
Chair Lady Littleton, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 464 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Littleton moves passage properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Keisling, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Amendment 1 does rewrite the bill. We're going to refer to the sponsor for further explanation. We move to adopt.
Chairman Keisling moves adoption amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chair Lady Littleton, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As amended, requires the Tennessee Department of Revenue to make available the public identity of the wholesalers, the suppliers, their addresses, the brands, and the designated territories these products are sold in. With that, I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Littleton renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 464 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 85, 5 nays, 2 present not voting.
House Bill 464 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled.
House Bill 1338 by Representative Ogles and others.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the request of the sponsor, I make a motion to hold this on the clerk's desk.
Objection. So ordered. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 37 by Representative Ogles.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, my understanding and request of the sponsor of the legislation, I make a motion to hold this on the clerk's desk.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 999 by Chairman Love and others, relative to federal block grant financing and other federal funds. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Love, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0485.
Representative Love moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 485 without objection, so ordered. Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this piece of legislation is designed to give us a better look at what federal funds may be left over in a department or an agency after they have expended some of those funds. As you know, we've had issues in the past with our departments and agencies receiving federal funding, and sometimes when the amount that they received is not all the way spent out, we don't know until some other report comes out and we find out that this agency did not spend all the money. It'll help us with transparency. It'll also help us be able to find other avenues to help these departments and agencies do their work. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Love moves passage of Senate Bill 485 on third and final consideration. Call up second, Mr. Clerk. Call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Love, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Representative Love renews this motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 485 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
Senate Bill 485 now received constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 976 by Chairman Williams, relative to drugs.
Chairman Williams, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I move passage of House Bill 976.
Chairman Williams moves passage properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Roll to the Hill.
Without objection, roll to the Hill. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 2 by Chairman Williams. Mr. Speaker, it was timely filed.
Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, members. This amendment is similar to the amendment that we just rolled to the Hill. It was just a run-on sentence, and technically they wanted to make it 2 sentences. With that description, Mr. Speaker, I move passage.
Chairman Williams moves adoption of amendment number 2, properly second. Any discussion on the amendment? Any objection to do a voice vote? See none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that brings the body back to the Hill of the amendments. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the self-designated House grammarian, I'm obligated to tell you that House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1 includes a cross-reference to the Commissioner of Mental Health and Substance Abuse power to add, delete, or reschedule dangerous drugs. The amendment we just adopted splits the language of House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1 into 2 sentences. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move to withdraw House Committee Amendment number 1.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill as amended exempts prescription medications approved by the FDA and designated, rescheduled, and deletes as a controlled substance. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Williams renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Representative Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could you give us a little more detail on what happens to the patient under this bill? What does it change?
Chairman Williams.
Thank you. Representative Stewart, all this bill does is create another opportunity for a drug like Marinol, which is a FDA-approved scheduled substance under the marijuana statute.
Representative Stewart.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 976 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 84, 3 nays, 3 present, not voted.
House Bill 976, having received constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 841 by Chairman Williams, relative to economic impact of changes to periods of imprisonment in government facilities.
Chairman Williams, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 841.
Chairman Williams moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kiesling, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment rewrites the bill. We'll defer to the sponsor for further explanation. Move to adopt.
Chairman Kiesling moves adoption amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Williams, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, currently, all incarcerations for new bills are calculated based upon a 10-year rolling average. This bill will change how we calculate incarceration in the state, which begins in January 1 of next year. This new process will continue the same rolling 10-year averages for increases in incarceration, but this body has promoted legislation which decreases incarceration and sets a formulary by which those decreases in incarceration can occur. Those monies that are set aside will then be used for operational expenses, much like we do other departments, and those monies that are set aside for maintenance will be used for maintenance so that we can better have a better understanding of what it costs to incarcerate people based upon our current statute. With that description, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Chairman Williams renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection? Which way? Representative Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Williams.
Sponsor, our present accounting with physical review and producing these notes, this is a derivative from the federal lawsuits in the 80s, if I'm correct.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, in the Sentencing Act of 1985, it was a byproduct of getting out in front of any legal action which may have occurred. We've been calculating since 1985 how we've been doing incarceration. In that calculation, it includes both maintenance or capital expenditure process as well as the operating costs. What this law will allow us to do is to understand the difference between those so that we can better budget for them.
Representative Beck.
And you don't have any concern that we might get into a situation without budgeting up front, as we presently do, and sort of amortizing it out over these many years like you're proposing, get into another situation where we have overcrowding and could possibly face another federal lawsuit.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill preserves that same formulary over the 10-year average as it relates to the increase in incarceration costs. But it also sets a standard as a one-year number as it relates for decreases, so that we also, because that Sentencing Act in 1985, there's not enough money in that budget. If we went to reduce incarceration by $50 million, there wouldn't be enough there. So this sets a new standard so that what you're concerned about funding future incarceration, that's still preserved. It's a better way to fund the new decreases in incarceration costs.
Representative Beck.
So you don't have any concern about future problems with overcrowding or federal litigation?
Chairman Williams.
Thank you. No, not based upon this formulary. Now, because of COVID and because of trials being postponed, we're going to see it one of these days when the courts open back up. We're going to see a surge of incarceration, but we've already calculated for all that in this in future in bills in the past.
Representative Beck.
Very good. Thank you for your answers.
Chairman Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor, for bringing the legislation. I just want to make sure I understand. So if we have a bill that's supposed to reduce incarceration moving forward, so like last year, I had a bill that did that very thing, and we said it was going to save the state $18 million a year. I was surprised to hear that the department had concerns with that. And what I realized was because that's going to impact how much money they get in next year's budget. Because the argument was that they weren't going to realize those savings on day one. Is that what this bill seeks to address?
Chairman Williams.
Yes, this bill seeks to address that specific issue as well as how the money's spent when it's allocated correctly.
Chairman Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And so finally, will this, for example, if I ran that same bill again, which has already passed and become law, so would it actually have a lower fiscal impact? It wouldn't save as much money, in other words, when we see the fiscal note?
Chairman Williams.
That is correct, because before, when we were calculating fiscal notes the same way for decreases as we were for increases, even though we don't open the prisons up and 10 years worth of people are walking out the door, it takes time to do that. But in order to fund the capital going forward for increases, we'd always do based upon a 10-year number.
Chairman Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor, for the legislation.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 841 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 72, 20 nays.
House Bill 841 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Let the journal reflect Representative Gillespie is excused. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1514 by Representative Cochran, relative to alcohol.
Representative Cochran, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1514 on third and final consideration.
Representative Cochran moves passage, properly second. Mr. Clerk, call up first amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kiesling, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill. We'll defer to the sponsor for further explanation. Move to adopt.
Chairman Kiesling moves adoption. Amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Ms. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Cochran, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Essentially what this bill does currently in the state of Tennessee, you have to be your town population has to be at least 925 to hold a liquor by the drink referendum. This lowers that population threshold to 700, essentially giving more towns control over their destinies, whether or not they want to do that liquor by the drink referendum. With that, I'll yield to any questions.
Representative Cochran renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1514 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 77, 11 nays, 4 present, not voted.
House Bill 1514 received constitutional majority. I hereby declare it passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 205 by Representative Cochran and others, relative to county boards of public utilities. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0614.
Representative Cochran moves substitute and conform to Senate Bill 614, probably seconded. Without objection, so ordered. Representative Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 0614 on third and final consideration.
Representative Cochran moves passage of Senate Bill 614 on third and final consideration, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk. Call up first amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment Number 1, Mr. Speaker. It's the same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sadly, Commerce Committee Amendment Number 1 is the same as Senate Amendment 1. Therefore, we must move to withdraw it.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Cochran, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And essentially what this bill does, it addresses an obscure type of utility district. There's only about 5 of them in the state. They are owned by 2 or more counties. Basically, it brings up the compensation level for those board members to the same level as municipal utility districts. Essentially, it updates that section of code. With that, I'll renew my motion.
Representative Cochran renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 614, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 83, no nays, 7 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 614, and received constitutional majority. I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 454 by Representative Hodges and others relative to immunization records. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Hodges, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 386.
Representative Hodges moves to substitute and form in Senate Bill 386, properly seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Hodges, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 386 on third and final consideration.
Representative Hodges moves passage of Senate Bill 386 on third and final consideration, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up first amendment.
House Education Administration Amendment Number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman White, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Hodges, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Representative Hodges renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? All those in favor of Senate Bill 386 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, no nays, 1 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 386, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 323 by Representative Hodges and others relative to juvenile offenders.
Representative Hodges, you are recognized.
I move passage of House Bill 323 on third and final consideration.
Representative Hodges moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Hodges, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So what this bill is about is about, I think, almost 2 years ago, we had a 14-year-old girl in Clarksville raped by 2 13-year-old boys. There was recordings of the rape, and these boys were found guilty in court, and they were given probation. The reason they were given probation is because the judge couldn't carry any heavier sentence on those kids because they were under the age of 14. The parents of the child that was victimized, Jessica and Eric, are here with us today. They came along with the victim to fight for some semblance of justice, not for themselves because they knew that their daughter could never get justice because that trial was over, but they wanted justice for future victims of this terrible crime. So hopefully we'll be able to give them some justice today by allowing the judge to send those children to juvenile detention and not have to just send them free after raping a child. And just to add insult to injury, guys, right now, the way the law is, that child would have been on the same bus going to school in the same school as the person they victimized under our current law. So with that, I renew my motion.
Representative Hodges renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. We are voting on House Bill 323. Vote aye when the bell rings if you're in support. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
House Bill 323, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 188 by Chairman Moon and others relative to occupational training.
Chairman Moon, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage on House Bill 188 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Moon moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment deletes Title 63, which deals with the healing arts from this bill. Therefore, I move to adopt.
Chairman Vaughn moves adoption. Amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Moon, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill as amended allows honorably discharged veterans to receive equivalent credit for the purpose of receiving an occupational license from the state of Tennessee. Evidenced by a form or certificate issued by the Department of Defense or the Veterans Administration. This bill is similar to Public Act Chapter 492, passed in the 111th General Assembly, that allows high school dual enrollment students and inmates to receive the same credit. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Moon renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 188 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
House Bill 188, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr.
House
Clerk.
Bill 1384 by Chairman Todd relative to licenses. Mr. Speaker, Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Todd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1199.
Chairman Todd moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 1199, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Chairman Todd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1199 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Todd moves passage of Senate Bill 1199 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee Amendment Number 1. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Halford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Government Operations Committee Amendment Number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chairman Reagan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment clarifies that the rules must be promulgated in accordance with the Uniform Administrative Procedures Act. Move to adopt.
Chairman Reagan moves adoption. Amendment number 2, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Todd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this law does, this bill actually gives the Tennessee Wildlife Commission the ability to promulgate rules that will allow the annual hunting and fishing license to be truly annual. Right now, they run from March 1st until the end of February. So if you went to buy a fishing license on February 25th, it would only be good for a few days. This would allow the commission to promulgate rules so that it would truly be an annual license. We started out with the intention of going ahead and making that change, but we found out that if we do it on the wrong date, then federal funds will be jeopardized. So we'll let the commission research that and make that decision. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Todd renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? All those in favor of Senate Bill 1199 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays, 1 present, unvoted.
Senate Bill 1199, I received constitutional majority. I hereby declare it passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 704 by Representative Hicks of Washington relative to contractors. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Hicks, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute conform to Senate Bill 577.
Representative Hicks moves to substitute and form Senate Bill 577 without objection. So ordered. Representative Hicks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 577 on third and final consideration.
Representative Hicks moves passage of Senate Bill 577 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Hicks, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 704 exempts from the definition of contractor any person that constructs or installs certain on-premises advertising signs and displays. Currently, to construct a sign that is more than $25,000, sign companies are required to have a contractor's license. Sign companies have seen costs go up is what the big deal is here. And a lot of these signs are going over $25,000. These are small businesses. These are businesses that like make our campaign signs, and they're small businesses that are growing. Municipalities and our counties are required. They have to turn in engineered drawings, and then these signs are inspected. And we believe that these sign companies shouldn't have to have a state contractor's license. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Hicks renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Sparks.
Would sponsor yield?
Representative Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative
Yes.
Sparks.
I just want to thank you for this piece of legislation. Would you say this is a good pro-business bill?
Representative Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, sir, it is, Representative.
Representative Sparks.
It's a good bill that will keep our businesses going.
Representative Sparks.
Thank you for carrying it. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 577 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts their vote, same members change vote. Do not. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
Senate Bill 577 have received the constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1015 by Chairman Hicks of Hawkins.
Representative Hicks at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request to roll House Bill 1015 2 weeks.
Without objection, roll 2 weeks. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1120 by Representative Hall and others relative to executive orders issued by the President of the United States.
Representative Hall, you recommend.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the passage of House Bill 1120 on its third and final consideration.
Representative Hall moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kiesling, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Amendment rewrites the bill. I'll defer to the sponsor for further explanation. We move to adopt. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Kiesling moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Hall, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1120, upon passage, will lay out the procedures for examining executive orders issued by the President of the United States. After reviewing the process, the Government of Operations Committee will hand it down to the Attorney General to determine constitutionality. If deemed unconstitutional, the Attorney General will seek exemption and seek to have the order deemed unconstitutional. This law would apply to every president. The ultimate decision would be made by the Attorney General, not the governor nor the legislative body. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Hall renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor Gill.
Representative Hall. Representative Stewart. He did.
Mr. Sponsor, it looks like the amendment has changed this bill pretty dramatically. At this point, what we're really doing is allowing the Government Operations Committee to just raise the issue. And then I think under the amendment, the governor, other than recommending that the Attorney General take a look at this, there's no more authority being exercised by this body. Is that correct?
Representative Hall.
That is correct.
Representative Stewart.
Is it your intention to demand that this amendment, essentially that this bill pass as amended?
Representative Hall.
That is correct, sir.
Representative Stewart.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I was clear on that. I have to say, I'm not voting for your bill because I don't believe that we need to be taking these actions. We've made it this far without a bill like this, but I do like the amendment. I think it's taken care of some of the constitutional concerns I had. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1120 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 70, 23 days.
House Bill 1120, I've received the constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 183 by Chairman Ramsey and others relative to art therapy. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill's on the desk.
Chairman Ramsey, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 101.
Chairman Ramsey moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 101, properly seconded without objection. So ordered. Chairman Ramsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 101 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Ramsey moves passage of Senate Bill 101 on third and final consideration, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Health Committee Amendment number 2. Mr. Speaker, it's similar to, but not the same as Senate Amendment number 2.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate amendment covers this language. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 2 is withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Ramsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill does one thing. It establishes licensure of licensed professional art therapists under an advisory committee within the Board of Psychology. With that explanation pending further questions, Mr. Speaker, I would renew my motion.
Chairman Ramsey renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? All those in favor of Senate Bill 101, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 81, 7 nays, 1 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 101, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 212 by Representative Clemens and others relative to bleeding control kits.
Representative Clemens, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 212 on third and final consideration.
Representative Clemens moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Clemens, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate what this legislation would do would authorize each local education agency the opportunity to develop and implement a Stop the Bleed program. And right now, in spirit of my good friend, the chairman's earlier legislation this evening, this is a life-saving piece of legislation for our children in our public schools. Accidental injury is a leading cause of death in Tennessee. Uncontrolled hemorrhage and bleeding is a leading cause of preventable traumatic death. In rural settings, up to 80% of deaths may occur in a pre-hospital setting. So in conjunction with the Department of Defense, the American College of Surgeons, they developed the Stop the Bleed program to put the knowledge gained by first responders and our military into the hands of the public to help save lives by stopping bleeding in emergency situations. This will allow bystanders with little or no medical training with appropriate training to become heroic lifesavers. I thank the American College of Surgeons Tennessee chapter and the Committee on Trauma, as well as the trauma surgeons at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, ETSU, and other hospitals around the state of Tennessee for bringing and furthering this important program. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Clemens renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 212, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
House Bill 212, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 767 by Chairman Hawk and others relative to insurance.
Chairman Hawk, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 767 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Hawk moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up first amendment.
House Insurance Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kumar, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt and expect the sponsor to give a great explanation. Thank you.
Chairman Kumar moves adoption. Amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Hawk, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This comes to us from the Department of Commerce and Insurance. This is known as the Tennessee Insurance Modernization Act. This bill ensures that Tennessee law stays current and consistent with international agreements and is not preempted by federal law. Additionally, with this bill, the department seeks to update and expand Tennessee's captive insurance law to authorize parametric insurance coverage and lower the initial capital requirements for captive sales. This bill eliminates any and unnecessary filing from workers' compensation insurance and repeals an annual reporting requirement that has run its course. Lastly, this bill eliminates the requirement that the Commissioner of Commerce and Insurance be named an agent for service of process for insurance division licensees. This will now reside with our Secretary of State's office. Pending any questions, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Hawk renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 767 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
House Bill 767, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 776 by Leader Gant and others relative to COVID-19 related relief payments.
Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 776 on third and final consideration.
Leader Gant moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up first amendment.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill. I move adoption of the amendment and I defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this legislation does is brought by our governor, and it authorizes businesses to deduct from the excise tax any CARES Act funds given to businesses in response to the COVID-19 pandemic from the state of Tennessee between March 1st, 2020 and December 31st, 2021. And I renew my motion.
Leader Gant renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 776 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Hang on. Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
House Bill 776, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 560 by Representative McKenzie and others relative to records.
Representative McKenzie, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for passage of House Bill 560 on third and final consideration.
Representative McKenzie moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative McKenzie, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill allows county clerks to include a box on business license applications where applicants can voluntarily indicate whether they're a veteran or minority-owned entities. This information will be public record, similar to how application names and addresses are now. This bill is entirely permissive and does not require any action by county clerks or applicants for business licenses. With that, I renew my motion.
Representative McKenzie renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Question? Representative Lafferty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real quick, trying to understand what this is coming from. In a world where people are trying to get more privacy, not less, can you help me understand what's brought this about?
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the question. This is businesses and chambers of commerce actually want this. So if someone wants to have, if they have a plumbing issue and they have they want a minority-owned or a veteran-owned entity to potentially do that work or bid on contract, that information is not before them right now. So this bill, again, is purely permissive, but it allows for that information to be shared if they wish.
Representative Lafferty.
Thank you.
Any further discussion before we go to Representative Parkinson? Just making sure. Don't want to get ahead of him. Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Sponsor, is this your first bill? You can just answer, Mr. Sponsor.
It is.
It is. Mr. Sponsor, the caption read that this was a bill about records. Is that true?
Yes, it is.
How does that record go? Can you sing it for us? Can you sing anything for us? Can you sing it all?
No, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Mr. Sponsor, you said this bill is permissive. Did you ask permission for it to be permissive?
Thank you for the question. I'm asking permission right now for it to be permissive.
Members, he's asking permission for his bill to be permissive. Should we give him permission? Okay, I see some head shaking no. Mr. Sponsor, this question came from another member, and I just wrote it down, so I'm not responsible for it, but it says, do you miss Rick Staples? Don't forget you're on the record.
Thank you for that question, and I'll renew my motion.
There you go. Great job. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. I just got a couple more questions, Mr. Speaker, if you bear with me. Mr. Sponsor, what is your occupation?
Currently, I am a project manager, but I work in...
Thank you for that, Mr. Sponsor. Mr. Sponsor, what is your trade?
My background's in physics.
Background in physics. So you're a scientist, safe to say?
Yes, but I turned to the dark side of management.
Oh, the dark side of Matt. Oh, more material. Thank you for that. Mr. Sponsor, so as a scientist, as a nuclear scientist, am I correct?
Something like that. Yes, sir.
Something like that, right? So, Mr. Sponsor, can you tell me the atomic makeup of your bill? Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Great job for our freshman member. We appreciate you, Representative McKenzie. You can answer that later and write it out, but good job. Congratulations on your first bill.
Thank you.
Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 560, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 84, 2 nays, 4 present, not voted.
House Bill 560, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1040 by Chairman Faison and others relative to services provided to the state by state officials and employees.
Chairman Faison, at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, in consultation with Speaker Sexton and understanding some concerns that were brought forth, we also understand that the House floor is not the proper place to amend a bill in any substantial form. So in keeping with our reverence for the committee system, Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a motion to re-refer this back to full state government.
Without objection, so ordered. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the regular calendar.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Unfinished business.
Unfinished business. Leader Lamberth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that House Bill 1591 be heard in the K through 12 subcommittee this week.
You've heard the motion. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Clerk, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, we have a message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I'm directed to return to the House. House Bill 1112, substitute for the Senate bill on the same subject, admitted and passed by the Senate.
Thursday's message calendar. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Announcements.
Announcements. Anyone seeking recognition? Representative Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the deadline to put bills on notice for the House Criminal Justice Subcommittee will be this coming next Wednesday, the 14th at 3:30 p.m. Thank you.
Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A reminder about the 7:30 a.m. devotion Wednesday morning in hearing room 3. Our speaker will be Pastor Mike Proctor of Grace Chapel. Everyone is invited. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Chairman Wendell, was your hand up? Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, members, the final calendar for the House Naming and Designating Committee will be held on Tuesday, April 13th. The deadline for bills to be put on notice will be Wednesday, April the 7th at 3:30. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The House Appropriations Subcommittee hearing on appropriations amendments will be canceled for tomorrow. We were able to get through all the budget appropriations amendments, all 240 of them in short order, and so there will be no need to meet tomorrow. Tomorrow, Appropriations Subcommittee is canceled Tuesday, April 6th. Thank you.
Chairman Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House Searsucker Caucus, you are looking mighty fine this evening. We would, Chairman Parkinson and myself would like for the caucus to convene down front for a photograph after this, if you could. So join us down front.
Any further announcements? I hereby appoint Representative Griffey to the following committee: Civil Justice Committee, Criminal Justice Committee, and Education Instruction Committee. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Roll call.
Roll call. Of what? Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, 93 members present. That completes the regular order.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until 9 a.m. on Thursday, April 8th, 2021.
Without objection, the House stands in recess till 9 a.m. on Thursday, April 8th, 2021.